What's up, everybody? Thanks for checking out the Glass Note podcast on the Coaches Site YouTube channel. So excited you can join us. Make sure you subscribe down below. We've got a ton of great coaching content coming your way. You don't want to miss out. Now, onto the show. Jody, thanks for joining us.
Aaron, thanks for having me.
So, we're just in our little preamble before we hit record. I mean, it sounds like in a given day, you're wearing any number of hats. When you go to a cocktail party and somebody asks you what you do for work, how do you respond to that?
Oh my gosh, I love that. Okay, so depends on who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
Okay. Because leading with I'm a psychologist, typically it makes people leave. So if I really don't like anybody in the room, I'm like, listen, I'm a psychologist.
Solve all your problems.
Then I get to do whatever I want. Yeah, I love to talk about trauma and relationship and, like how we just get the world reconnected. People are like, thanks for your time. But I think I'm so proud of being an author. I'm so proud of, as we just talked about, being a mom and a hockey coach and, building a company. I'm the CEO of my own company. And so I love talking business and, how we make all of this work in this very disconnected world when you want to throw punch people most of the day. I love all of that stuff. So yeah. So if we meet ever in real life and I open with I'm a psychologist, I'm probably not in the place to have a conversation.
So next week you're hitting the road. It's the Dr. Jody Carrington Road Show. You mentioned you're heading to New York, to Toronto. I assume that over the next couple of months, there's going to be several other stops. When you tell people that you're from Olds, Alberta, like what percentage of people are like, oh yeah, Olds, I know Olds.
Do you know what I say is where I grew up, which is Viking, and it's home of the Sutters and home of the Kinsella gravel pits. And so it's typically my opening line with most people. Now, the farther I get away from our Canadian venues, the less people know who the Sutters are. Or if they're not a big NHL city, then they're not really sort of sure. So I'm losing like the feel of that opener as being so powerful because anywhere in Alberta, generally in Canada, I'm like, so it's home of the Sutter brothers, 7 boys, 6 make the NHL. And I tried to marry one of them, didn't work out. It's fine. And that's, I had 7 shots and it didn't, anyway, it's fine. But that only goes so far now. So now I have to come up with other shit. But I gotta say, I'm so proud of coming from a small town because I think in all of the work that I'm doing now, it really gets back to those values that I learned in that very tight-knit, racist, disconnected, everybody knew everything about everybody community. But I can tell you the first and last name of every hockey coach I had. I can tell you what my bus driver's name was.
No
I can
way.
tell you that the school secretary's name was. Like it. Those are the things that I remember the most, not even, accomplishments or what people taught me or any of those things. It's how they made me feel. And I talked when we first met. I said, one of my favorite hockey quotes of all time is, "You should see how fast I can get a kid to skate when I know the name of."
Daryl said, I was going to get into that, like that got goosebumps when you threw that on the screen.
And and it's not ridiculously crazy. Like it's like you don't even have to be fantastic. The bar is low. Just be not, and so you can show up in all kinds of ways, but the ability to see a kid, to truly appreciate what each of us bring to an organization, even, your coaching staff, your team, building this company for me, I am amazed at how much it takes to keep people connected and engaged and seen.
Well, I was just going to say, you mentioned growing up in Viking, Alberta, you remember the name of all your coaches, your teachers, your bus driver. Do you think that's the case if you were going to school with a smartphone in your backpack?
So here's what technology will never, ever erase. We are wired for connection.
Yeah.
There is no replacement for human connection. In fact, if we disconnect from infants, they die. We are bio and neurophysiologically wired for connection. So even if I, wanted to create the most high functioning team and I had to do it all online, or if I had to sort of send a report to, sort of people that I want to teach or train, it is never as effective as being in the same room. There are neurophysiological changes that happen in our cortisol and, in our oxytocin and our dopamine that happens when we're in the same place. So even if we could have been doing this interview in your studio,
Yeah,
there would be a different synergy. Now, technological advances allow us
for sure.
to do so many amazing things, which I'm so grateful for. But I think that particularly during the pandemic, what it's really shown us is that we do need a break from the inundation of all the things that we have going on. But we will always want to get back to really knowing we matter. And I can't do that as effectively. And I often think about this, like with infants, I couldn't text a baby and say, calm down. I need to be in the physical presence of another to regulate their emotions. And you can do that. The more regulation skills you have, you're better at doing that when you're farther and farther away from people. But when the big shit happens, when somebody dies, when you get the cancer diagnosis, when you lose track of your best friend for whatever reason, or I need to be with you, if ever physically possible, to be in that place. Have you ever heard that? Like, I just need to get back to my people, or this happened and like I just need to go. I just need to go. It's this almost innate need to be with another, and especially when there's no language, right?
You know what? It's
That makes
yeah,
sense.
it does, and it's so interesting you say that. So this past weekend, I met up with a group of buddies. A couple of them flew in. We were at Predator Ridge, just outside of Vernon, for a boys'
Oh.
golf trip, and so we're
Mhm.
sitting out on the deck, watching the sun go down, having a few pops, and it just catching up, and it was awesome. And it's that connection, right? It's like we haven't all been together physically for gosh a long time. We've all got married, kids, etc. And so we start talking about work, and these guys are all extremely accomplished in in whatever endeavors they've taken on. And one of my friends, Justin, says he's talking about his job, and he has to go spend a week a month in New York at his head office at the Goldman Sachs building. He works in pharma, and he's talking about his role. And I said, gosh, like, what are the people like you work with? Like what are their backgrounds? He's like, I have no idea. I was like, how do you have no idea? Like, you're talking with them all the time. He's like, it's just work. Like, we don't talk about. I'm like, so you're telling me you got twin boys? Nobody at work knows that you have twin boys. They don't know about Simon and Bodie. He's like, wouldn't even occur to me. Like, I'd feel uncomfortable bringing it up. And I thought, man, and at the same time, we're sitting there connected. And I looked at our own organization here at the coaches side. I'm like, man, like we spend the 15 minutes of every meeting talking about bullshit, and that's the fun part. And so what do we learn from the last few years? And just, I mean, do you sense that in the work that you do, is this sinking in how important this is?
Yeah, I think so. Like, here's the thing, and you can be successful in some of your organizations where you can't, don't divulge. I mean, historically, that's how we've always
Yeah.
operated in a workplace, but we're also seeing massive levels of burnout. And I think that there's a connection between those two things. Because here's the thing: human relationship connection, being acknowledged by another, feeling important, being seen, um, pays no mind to age, race, religion, socioeconomic status, or gender identity or ability. Okay. So this is a universal desire to know that you matter. And you and I've talked about a lot about, particularly in the world of coaching, how so many times the ones who need it the most are the hardest to give it to.
Yeah.
So when we think about, when we have our needs met in other places, and so for your friend, for example, he has his opportunity to be with the boys on the weekend, and, he's in a relationship where he feels like he's valued, his babies really adore him, whatever the deal is, he gets a lot of those relationship needs connected. And so when he comes to work, it is often like, yeah, let's go, let's do it, let's use that part of my brain. The more we feel disconnected in our whatever sort of parts of our universe are in our world, the less empty we become, or the more empty we become, and the less we're able to give, to show up as a coach, to show up as a volunteer or a parent or a husband or whatever the deal is, because we're wired to have those relationships. And so if we don't build that in strategically in our work in some ways, right, in safe ways, then I think the cost becomes pretty great pretty quick.
Got it. So, just for a reference point, Olds, Alberta isn't quite smack dab in the middle between Edmonton and Calgary, but it's floating in between. Um,
You bet.
Flames or Oilers? Who's your team?
I'm a Sutter girl, so right now I'm a Flames, but I got it. Like, to the core of me, I'm an Oilers
Got
fan.
it. Okay. So let's start. So if Daryl Sutter calls you up and says, "Hey, Jody, um, you know, we're all in on winning the Stanley Cup this year. I want to bring you into training camp. I want you to talk to my team for 30 minutes. In those 30 minutes, what's your message to that team to help them perform better this year?"
Okay, so first of all, I tell them that the Flames are my favorite. We will scrap all of the
Yeah.
Oilers
Yeah.
love. Okay, so that's first of all. Um, here's the thing that I think matters the most in this process, right? Is that there is a necessity to remind them that no coach, no big shooter, no organization is going to be able to lead in doing the important work. It's up to you and me doing the next best right kind thing, and that we will have access to our skills, everything that we practice, if we are doing the best for ourselves first and then looking after our team second. Because if I'm not okay, the team I serve doesn't stand a chance. So when we talk about the importance of speaking to coaches, because I've talked to you about this a lot, I don't really give a shit about the players. I'm much more interested in the people who hang on to them, because they are barometers of who's leading that team. How you manage those players, primarily around their regulation ability, their ability to stay calm in times of distress. How do they know they matter? How do they know that they're important? Means they'll be able to stay calm when there's a shitty call, or somebody loses their mind on the bench, or there's some bullying that's happening within the team, or whatever is going on. If I have the ability to stay calm in times of distress, if I feel that on a team, I want to play my ass off. Does that make sense? So it's even surpasses skill level oftentimes, that emotional regulation ability, because you can practice all you want. You can have the best wrist shot in the business, and a coach makes a call. If you don't have the ability to stay calm and you lose your shit and start punching out everybody and throwing water bottles, you can't take that shot, because you've lost that access to part of, the prefrontal cortex is gone.
So I want to talk about regulation. So, prior to hearing you speak, when I heard that word regulation, my mind automatically went to the 90s hip hop song by Warren G. And I knew the word, but I didn't really know the word. And so I heard you speak. And so I come home. We've got a almost 4-year old. And you could play a Major League Baseball game in less time than it takes to get him into the wrapper at night. And so I come home, and that first night, I'm on bedtime duty. I go upstairs for 50 minutes and I walk downstairs, and my wife's like, what's Austin doing? And I'm like, "Oh, he's sleeping." She's like, "Sleeping? Like, that was like, what did you do?" And I'm like, "I just stayed regulated." And she's like, "That's brilliant. Where'd you learn that?" I'm like, you lucked out. You won the lottery, husband lottery, sweetie." And kidding. But no, I referenced him back to your talk, and I said, just that simple acknowledgement in the moments when your kid or your players are, their temperature is rising and they're acting out. Just that simple acknowledgement that, hey, a little bit of self-talk, hey, you got to stay calm. Just it really made all the difference in the world. And I kept going back to, like, gosh, like when I started coaching, losing your shit was a strategy. Like literally, like people, like it was talked about. It's like, oh, we better go in here. Like, we're not playing well. We better go in here and break something. Um, where is that shift being adopted now? Like, are we tuning into this and looking at it as equally as much as I guess strategy when we're leading and coaching people?
Okay, so two things. There are take charge moments. The kicking the shit out of the garbage can and throwing a water bottle is not off the
Okay.
table. Okay, so let's, before they think this is some touchy-feely
Yeah.
bullshit, if you're very committed to kicking garbage cans and throwing water bottles, okay, don't shut off the podcast.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'm going to explain to you from a neurophysiological perspective what happens when we get the best out of our players. Okay, so, and I'm going to take it back to a kid. So if you've ever sat with a 3-year-old, right, and you look at them and they're doing an amazing job, and maybe your mother-in-law's there and they're like, oh my God, he's using his words, his manners, he's being kind maybe to a sibling, and you're like, oh God, people are saying to you, how's your son so amazing? You're like, well,
Yeah.
I know. And then 20 seconds later, he loses his shit because he wants a ring lollipop for breakfast. And somebody says, no, dude, Austin, not your day, bud. We got to do this first. And so he's on the floor, kicks the chair, takes his clothes off, says fuck. And your mother-in-law is like, oh,
Yeah.
oh, I have never
Seen this movie.
Okay. So, right. What has Austin lost his ability to speak? Has this kid had a stroke? Has he, has he been possessed? What is he lost his ability? No, he's lost access to it. And that is the definition of emotional regulation. When you are good at not losing access to your ability to stay calm and use your words and be kind, have access to all your sort of skill level. This skill of emotional regulation is nothing you're born with. In fact, we're all born with only fight, flight, and freeze. Yeah. Right? So when we're calm, we're all great. But our ability to stay there is learned in relationship with another person. And by the time, when you think about how many times kids lose their shit, they 0 to 2, yeah. Right? Their primary job is to have big people there to walk them home. And when the big people are, largely speaking, even 30% of the time, relatively intact, calm, healthy, doing all those things, these kids start to learn those skills on their own. If you're surrounded by multiple generations of abuse, neglect, and trauma, if everybody loses their shit at every juncture, you step up into the big world with only fight, flight, and freeze on board. So if you coach one of these kids and they're sort of in grade 7 and you say, dude, you're sitting today because this isn't okay. And he's like, fuck you. And he breaks the stick and he runs out of the room and he does all these kind of things, yeah. Right? Whereas another kid takes a deep breath and says, okay, I get it. I need to try harder. Can you give me another chance tomorrow? There's the difference, sure, between somebody who gets instantly dysregulated and somebody who has the ability to stay regulated longer. Now, we all lose our minds.
For sure.
This is, yeah, not what we're talking about is how do we build skill into a team to stay calm in times of distress? And that is often led at the helm. So the more I stay calm, kids are looking to their parents. If they get lost or something happens, or there's a big thing, there's a siren, they're going to look to primary caregiver to see what's happening. And if primary caregiver is going, holy fuck, they lose, yeah, it. Huh? If mom and dad go, it's okay, it's just a fire truck passing by, we're cool, the kid stays calm. Same on a bench. Somebody makes a bad call, everybody's looking to the leader. What's going on? The captaincy is second in charge of these things, but who's really leading this gate? Okay, come here, boys. Girls, let's talk about this. Here's what we're gonna do, right? Now, is there a time where there's a take charge moment? Is there times where we don't have enough resources to be able to not kick the shit out of something? And is it even sometimes necessary to let your team know this is a massive line, I'm super disappointed, or I'm pissed off that you would do that? Yes. Whenever possible, stay as calm as you possibly can. Whenever necessary, take charge. And those are the two things that apply for me in the world of parenting, in business, in coaching hockey, because it is so critically important. Listen, we've never been this disconnected in the history of the free world. The kids we coach will become more and more dysregulated because the only way you teach somebody how to regulate is you look them in the eye, yeah, again and again and again, right? And we talked about this in our Hockey Alberta talk. You think about the square footage of the house that your grandfather was raised in, and the square footage of the house that we raise our babies in. There's less face-to-face communication now than there's ever been in the history of our world.
Coaches ask me all the time how they can get more accomplished during their practice. My answer, Huddle. Here's why. Because the more you can teach and educate off the ice, the more progress you can make on the ice. Huddle is the leading video and data solution for ice hockey in the world. Huddle delivers simple yet powerful video review tools with desktop and mobile apps, enabling entire teams to review, study, and share video anywhere and at any time. Plus, with Huddle Assist, you can quickly get access to a full suite of game stats along with your film breakdown, so you can analyze both your team's and individual player performance, ensuring you provide objective feedback. Right now, listeners of the Glassnote podcast can get a great discount on Huddle products. To learn more, check out huddle.com/the coaches site for details on this exclusive offer. That's HUDL.com/the coaches site. It's interesting. And one thing I'm going to pay close attention to this hockey season is, probably over a year ago, I had a lot of conversations with people. They said, hey, especially at the administration level with minor hockey, and they're like, one of the silver linings of the pandemic, and I don't really like using that term, but they said, I think, parents in particular, but a lot of the, as you say, big people in the rinks are realizing that, hey, this game transcends, playing in the Western Hockey League or going on the NHL, like people are realizing that, hey, they've had a the glue in the community, the glue in their social lives has been taken away from them, and they want that back. And they said, we're hopeful that people are going to come back and realize, like, hey, maybe the focus of the reason we're doing all this is about that human connection and really leaning into that. And time will tell if that's the case, if people can stay on that track. But with all that being said, there's hockey coaches, you know, all over the world, anywhere they can freeze water, who are getting set to get their team prepared for the season. What would you tell those coaches in terms of how they perhaps create an environment where those connections are enhanced?
I love that question. I think what we need to know is coming into this season, we're hoping that the effects of the pandemic are over, but I will tell you they're not. And this isn't sort of the rosy message we really want to, because what we really value in our culture, in our society, is, in fact, calmness.
Yeah.
We like it best when people are emotionally regulated. And so when they're not, we want to get there. We want to Mary Poppins it. We're good. It's good. You're good. We're good. Chest bump. We're good. It's fine. It's fine. You're fine. I'm fine. It's so good. So we really want to get back into this season of just like, let's get back to normal.
Yeah.
And I want that too. But what I really want to caution is that we have, as a globe, been through a really disconcerting time for 2 years that isn't over as soon as the masks come off. And there's a big difference between a removal of the stressor and the stress response. I don't know if you've ever seen somebody, they make it to retirement and they work their ass off to get there, and then they just fucking die in the next week because they've been holding this their whole life. And then it's like this. Or if you've ever gone, you went on a holiday, you get on the plane, and you feel like you should be relaxed, but it takes you 5 days.
Yeah.
Even though the work is done or you've put it behind you, your body doesn't know that. And there's 3 things that sort of lead into being the most dysregulated: uncertainty, fear, and no end in sight when there's no plan. Uncertainty, fear, and no plan. That's where kids, people, you and me do the worst. Okay? Uncertainty, fear, no end in sight. Think about the 3 components of a global pandemic.
Yeah. Just described it.
Uncertainty, fear, no end in sight. So first, just a second. So for 2.5 years as a globe, we have been in this place of dysregulation. And that is evidenced by things like child maltreatment have not been this high. Divorce has risen by over 33% in North America. We have seen domestic violence at higher rates before than we've ever seen them before. And so the question is, have we all then lost our friggin' minds? Are we all obviously bad people now? No. We're in this state of dysregulation. That means when I'm empty and you're empty, we have a really hard time sort of coming together and being respectful. When you're dysregulated, you're chippy. I mean, think about somebody in a bar fight. That's emotional dysregulation. You walk into a bar, you can use your words, huh? You can maybe 2-step. I mean, Billy Bob's grad 93. That's where I learned, huh? You step into this, everybody's calm. What happens when somebody spills a drink or they think that something's been wrong and they just snap? Yeah. That's emotional dysregulation, right? So what does somebody look like after a bar fight? They're exhausted. Where's their access to empathy and kindness and connection? It's gone. Now, have they lost that ability? No, they've lost access to it. So we're just stepping back into these organizations where parents, kids, administrators in our local hockey rinks have been in this heightened state of arousal, and we're just not quite yet done there. So it's okay when we step in and really know that we have to do a little bit more effort around reassurance. Also, we've talked about Hockey Canada's sort of very public display of concerning behavior. And so there is going to be this heightened state of arousal that is going to require a lot of emotional regulation in this process to get trust back, to rebuild a culture, to be really connected in a way. And that's what we've missed in so much of the experiences that are becoming so public and problematic, is how do we stay connected to each other and know that this is bigger than a game?
Well, so I think you bring up the elephant in the room that exists, particularly in our country and certainly in the hockey community. And just to be clear, I mean, the issues that Hockey Canada is dealing with now, I mean, just even the last few weeks, we're seeing it in other sports. This is not unique to our game, but a lot of the conversations that I've had with coaches over the past few months is they say, I recognize the platform I have. I'm certainly not trying to not teach or reinforce good character, good morals, good values. But now, and I understand that coming into this year, like I'm going to have some tough conversations, and usually the sticking point is, okay, at what age is it appropriate to start having those tough conversations? But you've done a lot of work with teachers. Like I would sense that in that profession where you're dealing with kids, the amount of training and guidance that they receive trumps what we give hockey coaches and youth sports coaches. So you've got these group of people that are like, hey, I want to make a difference. I see what's going on. I understand it starts at the grassroots level, but I need some tools here to help me help them being the kids.
And I'm so excited in some of our talks together, Aaron. I think that there's just so much work to be done in this
There
place.
is.
And I think it all comes from a place. Listen, I have never met a hockey coach that didn't get into this business because either they loved the game or they wanted to be there because their kid's on the bench. And I think that what becomes so critically important is historically, we've done this the same way because we've always done it this way.
Yeah.
And one of the scariest phrases in the human language is this: we've always done it this way. And when you are led by, we've come from two generations, even, one generation ago, where you don't talk about things. You just buck up and get her done. You're fine, I'm fine. And when there is no emotional language around that place, of talking about anxiety or how difficult it is to sort of step into a high performance arena when you're not very old. Who's got you? Who gives you names to those feelings? Because you have to name it to tame it. There's no difference between men and women in terms of their emotional makeup. The issue is women historically, those identifying as females historically, have had much more opportunities to talk about their emotions. Highest rate of suicide in this country right now is middle-aged men, primarily because we've been significantly disconnected by, our physical proximity to each other in just one generation. And we have not made up for lost time because of technological advances in our ability to speak to each other. So even in the evenings when we spend time with our partners now, instead of sitting around playing, 3 games of crib at night because that's all we had access to, we now are all both on our phones. We're into our respective Netflix shows and we don't look at each other. Because what is really ironic in this whole business, this is the thing that gets me the most as a psychologist, the hardest thing you will ever do is look into the eyes of the people you love. So the thing we need most right now to stay connected and calm and know that we can do great in this world, that our players will go to the best of their capacity, is going to be hard for so many people at their helm, right? Because our hockey coaches are generally volunteers. Our hockey coaches are typically, they almost made the dub, or they were, I really know what I need to. And we've talked a lot about the importance of like getting the X's and O's as being the focus of, coaching. But I'll tell you, you can save a life, not only change it, by showing up and being somebody for that kid who's always fucking late, or who is making snow angels in the corner, or who's like, you know what, fuck you, I don't like you anymore, and leaves. Who then follows that kid and says, tell me more. What's going on? What am I missing? And it becomes really tricky because that's not acceptable behavior. That's not how you can, you don't deserve to be treated like that. But the question is why? It's not always about what's wrong with you. That's how we were raised. But this question gets me every time. What happened to you?
Okay, so you might have you're not going to make your 2:30 meeting now, Jody, with that answer. Like we just added like hours to this. So I'll try and keep the train on the track here. So you talk about eye contact, and I've heard you touch on this, and one thing that's occurred to me. So every coach can relate to, it's, you call a timeout, it's a tight game. Maybe in between periods in the locker room, you're going into overtime, everybody's tense. Would it be an appropriate strategy to simply say, hey team, before we go out there, I want everybody just to pause and look everybody else in the eye? Is there a power in that?
Yeah, they're going to freak out. Because even if I got, imagine if we have a bunch of coaches in the room, imagine that where we met, Aaron, if I got in that room and I said to everybody, okay, I want you just to look at each other right now. Do you know what happens?
I think with a group of adults, but I wonder with players that, in that sort of like, there's a safe space in the locker room. And I wonder like, gosh, maybe that's the litmus test for your team to say, if you can't do that, if you can't get your team, whether they're, 10 years old or 30 years old, if they can't sit in a room and look each other in the eye, then man, like, you got some work to do.
Here's two things I'm going to do as a coach. I'm going to do my very best to look every player in the eye as they come in my dressing room. I'm going to do my very best, particularly in minor sport. Okay. I'm going to do my very best job to not sort of show in as the heavy at the very end once everybody is, got in there. I'm going to do my very best to look you in the eye. Oh my gosh, you're here. Smasher. Good to see ya. Oh, how you doing? And the quieter kids, I'm going to slow down and do that as well. And then what I'm going to do is if a kid ever loses their freaking mind, if it's a big deal and I call a timeout, I'm going to see if everybody can get a drink of water, because you cannot chew and swallow with a flipped lid. It's biologically impossible for me to engage in that process. I think about this the last time you were just so fucking mad you wanted a snack.
Yeah.
Those two things don't go hand in hand. So if I am going to say, look at me, all of you right now. I know you're mad. And particularly the kid that's over in the corner, just like, and he's just like, watch the breathing, because you are not regulated if your breathing is shallow. Come on, boys. Let's go fucking kill him. Okay, look at me. I love the passion. Let's get a drink before we head out there on the shift, okay? Let's go. Now we got it. Okay. So it's those kind of things that I want the energy and the passion, and I appreciate that. You don't have to turn into a softy fucking let's all hug and kumbaya shit. But how do we really remember that we have to sort of look at me and get you back to that prefrontal cortex that allows you to use all the skills that I've worked with you on as your coach for sometimes years, that having access to that ability is one of the most, I think, golden threads in coaching that we don't talk about enough. If you tell me who your favorite hockey coach was, okay? If we had anybody on here today who I would say to them, relatively speaking, who's the one that made the most impact in a good way on your career?
Yeah, Peter Doyle.
Why?
That's a great question. Man, I sense it was just because he talked to me like a person. Like I never felt like he was talking to a kid. I felt like he was just talking.
What? The bar is low. Peter Doyle talked to you like you were a person. You didn't come out of here and say, listen, he had the best fucking strategy.
Yeah.
His D strategy blew my mind. No. Excuse me. He talked to you like a person. Imagine.
Yeah, I was 14 years old. 14 years old at the time.
14 years. This was, let's say, 10 years ago, give or take. And instantly, in this room where Peter Doyle is nowhere present, you pull the image up of that human being who just made you feel seen. And here you are, a successful business owner, still in this world of hockey, trying to make a difference in the lives of kids and coaches. And Peter Doyle is the first name. He's the best guy. And I will tell you, everybody listening can say to me, it was him. For me, it was Coley McLaren. For me, everybody can do that. And then also some people can do that and say, this is the guy that fucked me up. This is the guy that was the worst. And it will be the opposite, generally speaking, the opposite experience, right? I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel valued. There was shame. I felt, and listen, we can make guilt a big motivator, but shame is a whole other destroyer of the human psyche. And we've typically been raised in this world of shame as a motivator. And you can get instant results from shame, but you will crush kids with shame.
That's so interesting. So when I heard you speak early on in your talk, you brought up the statistics, and you've touched on it here that, middle-aged males, that the suicide rate, and perhaps you can just touch on some of the statistics, but it's a lot higher than the rest of the population. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different sort of spikes that are very clear, but yes, in particularly in our country right now, middle-aged men have the highest rate of suicide.
So we work with coaches, and so I'm driving back to the Calgary airport from Red Deer, and I just had this like epiphany, and I'm like, oh my god, like that's the exact population. Like when I look at our coaches site membership, they're middle-aged males. Like these are the people that we're putting in charge of our kids, and we have statistics to show that these are the people that are probably the least reluctant to access self-care or to have a conversation with somebody if they're having a bad day, or whatever the case may be. Self-care is a term that we hear a lot. I'm not sure if we really know what that means. How would you define that, and what does that mean for people?
There's I think so many things in that statement, and I think I'll clarify. I think self-care has really been bastardized in this whole process of mental
Yeah.
health work. Like, what does that mean, right? I also hear this all the time. What does it mean to do the work? People say, okay, she's done her work, or now I can date again because I've done my work,
Yeah.
or what, like, I don't know what that means, but I'll tell you what it means is that you know we are all in a place as human beings of wanting to know that we matter. And when I know the name of a kid's dog, you should see he'd skate through walls for me. Okay. And this becomes true in so many ways. But the issue is when there is an ability to sort of provide an emotional language, we have to have somebody show us how to do that. And historically speaking, there's a big difference between men and women. And we really think, I mean, in many respects. But even if you think about this, I'll just make this really as simplistic as I can. You think about when you walk into Toys R Us today, right? There's a blue side, a penis side, and a vagina side, a pink side.
Yeah.
Okay. It's very delineated. Even now, we think we're better. We're
Yeah.
not. Okay. It is absolutely a spectrum of identity, but we're still very two ways of
Yeah.
operating. What do you see in the blue section?
The blue section.
I'll
Yeah.
tell you. Yeah. Like guns and shooting
Got
and
it. Yeah.
animals.
Yeah.
And
And
in each
it's interesting because
section,
it
there's
starts
the
when you're a
most.
kid. To like that's never
Well,
just occurred.
and it's okay if we have likes or affinities to certain things based on the way that our body is made up. But here's the difference, or here's the thing that always gets me. Both of those people have the exact same emotions. And I historically give females a much better opportunity to talk about how they're feeling. And if you have to name it to tame it. So generally speaking, particularly men have 3 words: happy, sad, and pissed off,
Yeah.
despite the fact that there's 78 emotions. And so if I say to a kid and he's just feels like he's disappointed me, feels like a big fucking failure, he's let this team down, and I say to him, dude, what's going on? I'm just pissed off. I'm less inclined to be like, hey, watch your tone. What's going on? You watch it. It becomes really important to be able to sort of set into some of those sometimes, to be able to be like, okay, whoa, slow it down for me.
Yeah.
Slow it down for me. And if there's no emotional language there, then sometimes it's this ability to be able to say things like, did you feel like you let us down? Right? What is this, And it becomes really hard to do that when you're a one-man show. And I think we put a lot of, responsibility of big emotions on minor hockey coaches, that they're like, well, I don't know what the fuck to do, like, what am I supposed to say?
Yeah.
And it becomes so critically important, right, to lean on a staff of coaches. Who do you have on the parents side of things? If kids are struggling, I remember even in our early teams, I would see my husband on the bench going like and we're generally better with other people's kids.
Yeah.
Right? So in our communities, how do we sort of work on this process of being like, okay, I know that Jesse's always going to struggle, right? So instead of benching him and taking shit away, let's figure out why he's struggling. Well, okay, the kid's on the spectrum, or he struggles with this. Okay, so what's going to help him stay regulated? A snack often works. Cool. Let's always make sure we have shit on the bench and you
Yeah.
know, making sure we have the water bottles, all those kind of things. But we do this really big thing of trying to get kids to be back to regulation. We want to get them better. And I'll tell you what never works, telling somebody to calm down.
Yeah, I think anybody that's married or in a long-term relationship can relate to that.
Calm
Yeah.
down. Use your words. I'll calm
But yeah,
down.
but it is. I think as
So
a coach,
listen,
it does. It puts people on their heels instantly. Like it's just wall.
yeah.
Boom.
Can I? And I'll tell you. I'll tell you 3 words that always make me allow me to get a kid regulated. Okay, this is probably like the 3 words I use all the time, especially when I want to fix. Tell somebody to calm down, smarten up, don't be a dink, any of those things. These are the 3 words I insert before I get as mad as I usually do. These 3 words: tell me more.
Got it.
I don't want to fucking play today. Oh yeah? Then get out. When I do this, tell me more. If you hear a deep breath, you're getting somewhere.
Got it. That's so
If a
great.
parent comes into me, and says, "Why'd you bench my kid, you son of a bitch? I paid my dues just like everybody else in here." Okay, come here. Tell me more.
Yeah.
Well, the scouts were there today and I want to make sure he gets seen. I know, dude. I know. Me too. Here's where we're at, and sometimes it takes a little longer than that. I get it. But those are sort of my magic.
Sure.
Like, tell me more. What am I missing? What's the hardest part? Any of those things that kind of make you sort of slow down a little bit. If you watch those shoulders drop, if you see the deep breath, then I know this is historically in therapy. This is the best thing I want to have happen. I don't really actually care what comes out of your mouth. Like, I don't want to be here. And the kid goes, I know he does. Right? He just doesn't have the words to tell me that yet. Or, I'm more inclined to sort of then have somebody who is not going to lose their mind because they have access to more words, to their kindness. Their anger is not going to, sort of get the best of them. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it does. And so I think it's a good segue because right now there's coaches all over the place who they're not probably saying it out loud, but in the back of their mind, they're like, I hope that kid doesn't get on my team. I hope I don't have to coach that kid this year. Like they're waiting for the rosters to come out and, however that works at the respective associations. And, after hearing you talk and reading kids these days, the one thing that I kind of look to as a bit of a North Star now is like, as a sport, if we can change the dialogue to where coaches feel equipped and in a position to say, no, that's not getting that kid on my team is an adversity. That's an opportunity. Like that's why I showed up in the first place, is to take those kids and make a difference. Like when we get to that point, man, then we know we're making progress. And I look at, how do we, but then of course it's, what's the roadmap to getting there?
It doesn't mean it's not going to be hard, and it's totally okay. I mean, I do that too. I look at the roster, I'm like,
Man,
oh,
Jimmy.
And usually it's not the kid, it's the parent. I usually decide whether I'm happy or not based on,
but you, it's so okay, so great. So you say that. I'm so glad you did, because you just talked about, and I'm going to screw this up, but if you got to acknowledge it, you can't deal with it. Take me back here. I got my notes here.
Yeah, when you're acknowledged, you rise.
Okay, yeah.
When you are acknowledged, you
or if you
rise.
can't name it, you
And
can't tame it. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
If you can't name it, you can't.
Okay, name it.
So it's like, and the whole parent thing, I'm like, we need to start talking about this because it's an issue and nobody wants to bring it up, because if they bring it up, they're going to be like, oh man, if I bring that up in the parents meeting, then I'm going to get chastised. And it's like, no, like if we don't acknowledge that the attitude of parents affects not only the culture and the team, but more importantly, like, man, we talk to coaches all the time. They're like, I spend 50% of my time dealing with bullshit with parents. Like that's literally like, and it's like, if we don't acknowledge that that's a thing, and we got to get on the same page, then we're just, then 10 years from now, we're going to be talking about the same narrative.
100%. And I think sometimes I hear this all the time, right? I got into this to coach kids, not be a social worker for their parents, or like, I'm not, when do I have time to do this? And this, this is a volunteer position, this is all these things. I will tell you the investment in the parent meeting becomes really critical. One-on-one conversations with parents who historically, have struggled in the past to be the team player or to take good, responses from the coach. I will tell you, this is a Brene Brown quote, but people are hard to hate close up.
Yeah.
And when we sort of have that story about a kid, their family, before we even start, typically they can feel it from the parking lot. And part of I think the most ballsy thing you can do is sort of have those conversations. Sit down and say, as a team, first of all, here's what I'm hoping for. I know sometimes when we get really intense, I want to win. I want these kids to develop and be better. That's what I hope for this season. I'm so grateful that I get to spend time with your kids. I know how much they mean to each of you and how much you want them to perform. I'm going to take some hard lines around, how we speak to each other and, how they show up, not only in the dressing room, but in the community and on the ice. And I know that I can't ask them to do things I'm not going to ask of myself. So I'm also going to have some of those conversations with you. If that's, if we need to, if you ever have a concern, talk to me, or I got this coach or our manager's this person. You got the four of us, right, who are going to navigate these kids through this year. And I'd love to have those conversations with you, and then I would on purpose reach out to the ones who I know are going to need it the most. Right? Hey, can we grab a coffee?
Yeah.
What are you worried about the most? And not with the listen, you have been an asshole previously, and if you show up this way, I'm kicking your kid off the bench. You can, but I would suggest that you kind of slow down a little bit and acknowledge, and then they rise.
Okay, so and I know we're gonna have to run out of time soon. I want to pull out some actionable insights here, but I've heard you tell a story, and I think it relates to this about in your work at schools, where advising teachers to say, hey, if you've got a problem kid, take the time out to not only go have a conversation with the parent, but let them know that your child's valued, and just that that kind of, all of a sudden there's a little bit of camaraderie, and I think that's just so wise. It's so obvious when you hear it, but I sense it's the last thing we want to do instinctually.
Yeah, I think sometimes, we get really invested in the kids, and sometimes we even feel protective
Yeah.
over them, right? If we see dad screaming at him in the hallway, or they're always late to practice, or, they're left at the rink forever and, they don't have supper, we sometimes get very protective over the kids. But here's the issue. If you can make a significant investment in the parents in any way, given how much time you have, I get it. When you have them bought in, the kid is more inclined to buy in. Because you can do everything you want with the kid, but if they go home and the parents are really disgruntled with your coaching ability, your plans, your whatever, it's the division of loyalty will always fall at home. So if they get into the car, because it has to, and the kid's like, what did he say? What did Aaron say today?
Yeah.
You don't have to fucking listen to that guy, okay? Because he's a bit of a fucking, he think, so I love the kid. He wants to play for me, right? But he's really got to navigate his devotion or his respect for me, and making sure that his dad's okay. So part of my biggest investment in time, when I sort of can see that dynamic happening, is going to be like, Aaron, do you have a chance? Can we grab a coffee? Right. I just wanted to talk a little bit about Austin. I think I feel so lucky to coach him this year. I just want to talk a little bit about, what you think about my style, if you have any feedback for me. And I want to tell you a little bit about how I think he's doing. Could we grab 5 minutes?
Yeah. No, bingo.
And the bark is, generally speaking, a lot bigger than the bite, because nobody's done that for them before.
Yeah.
And if you have that capacity to sort of sink into that, you then start to create a insular level on a team that really allows the kids to do better. Right? Does that make sense?
Does.
And so how we sort of work that is so much more about leadership than it is about coaching skill. And some of the most successful teams really understand the importance of the relationships that surround the team, not just how those players show up.
Talk to me about a light up moment.
Okay. So a light up is really about the idea of everybody deserves to have somebody that's crazy about them. And how you sort of let your players know that they matter really comes down to sort of noticing them when they step in. There's two kinds of kids in this world, and this is so simplistic, but I talk about it in kids these days. There's two kinds of kids in this world that help me understand them. There's either the flat Stanleys, those are the ones with hoodie up, hair down, they come in there, or the Cailloux. Now, Cailloux's a cartoon for anybody with kids that is this like life sucking, whiny, annoying, so those are the ones that come into the dressing room, and you can hear them coming down the stairs, and they're and they're like, coach, and they're always like, can I go first? Line in front of the line. Totally. And then they like don't know where their fucking
attention vampires.
Crying. Oh my god. So both of those kids have the exact same needs. They need to be seen. How I meet those needs is entirely different. I will tell you, the Cailloux, we often want to ignore and sort of show them that their behavior is annoying, and we don't address them until they use their words and be kind. They actually require the exact opposite. Those are my beat them to the punch kind of kids. They come in so loud and over the top because their bucket's empty and they're looking for anything to fill it. So if I understand that strategy, those are the ones that when he comes in the dressing room, I'm gonna be like, woo, Caillou, you're here. I'm so excited, dude. Fist bump. Oh my gosh, are you ready today? Let me get your water bottle filled up. Let's go. I love it. What if I responded to Flat Stanley the same way? Flat Stanley comes in, hoodie up, hair down, in his eyes. He's just trying to sulk into the, corner of the dressing room. What if he came in and I was like, woo, Stan's here. Let's go. Right? He's quitting my team. So Stan requires a go low and go slow. Both of those babies want to be seen, but Stan's the kid that I'll let get dressed, get out onto the ice. And I might at some point when he has a good shift, come over, put my hands on his shoulder pads and be like, dude, you're my bestie out there today. Keep it up. I'm so glad you're here. And he might look at me. If you've ever coached a Flat Stanley and you get the side eye and that maybe even a head nod, you basically can retire because you've got into that, that kid is like, watch me. And then you watch what happens that next shift. Yeah. Right. So it's interesting to me that, both of those, it's a long trajectory. But of those kids sort of have the exact same needs. It's how they're identified and seen and acknowledged, right? Not just because of their point streak, not just because of, whatever they have a letter. What is their contribution to your team and how can you celebrate that either in a big way or a way that they can hear it? And every kid is bringing you something. And, even if you're novice C, tier 642, there's something about those. And those are often my favorite teams to coach. Yeah. Because they don't give a shit. And their parents are like, when's the tournament so we can rent the bus? Like I am, so it really has nothing to do with skill level for me. In fact, and then in the higher skill levels, what I often see is that they're always identified by their skill level, not by anything else. And so their anxiety is so high if they feel like they can't perform. When you start to sort of acknowledge kids for other abilities, right? Like, their connection on the bench, their kindness to the Zamboni driver, their humor. They then become more than a wrist shot. They become more than, the power play guy. They're actually a part of the team, and they want to show up for you because they're like, yeah. If you ever got kids that really want to show you stuff, like whatever it is, if you're coaching the little guys, like I got this Pokemon or there's where I'm at Minecraft. When you get excited about the things they love, they'll skate harder for you. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm so glad you said that because, we work with, hundreds of minor hockey organizations in Canada and the US. And I'll tell you, there is a vacuum of people stepping up to coach those teams that you just described. Like everybody wants to see I'm going to coach my own kid or I want to coach the super duper elite team. And nobody wants to work in the middle, and we got to find it, and we got to create some value there. I think it's really, really important. One thing I want all of our listeners to do, if you got a pen, write this down. If not, just remember to come back to it. I want you to go to drjodycarrington.com. And if you hang out on the homepage long enough, a little pop-up's going to appear, and it's 5 tips every leader needs to know. And so I'll let people go through that process. I encourage you to, I'm going to print this off. It's going to go somewhere where it's an eyesight on a regular basis. But point 4 or lesson 4 that has really stuck with me is be kind and don't tolerate bullshit, in that order and on repeat. What does that mean?
We historically come from a generation where you have to earn respect. So you come in and you show me, and then and only then will I give you my kindness. We have changed so significantly that those rules that we were raised by no longer serve the generation of kids we're coaching. And it is a important shift to make if you want to make sure these kids stay alive, if we want to make sure that they're not riddled with anxiety and depression, and that they're bullying each other just to get a place on the notch in the system. Be kind and don't tolerate bullshit, in that order, matters so much, because we are really misunderstanding this idea of being nice and really engaging and encouraging to kids. It does not mean everything goes. It means kids need to know where the limits, the boundaries, what's acceptable on your team, what is tolerated, because what you permit, you promote. Let me say that one more
Yeah.
time. What you permit, you promote. If it's okay that you're booze until 6 o'clock in the morning, and it's okay we talk about women this way, it's okay, you promote it. So be very fucking careful what you permit these days. And being kind is a very, very powerful currency. But it does not mean that you do not have respect and limits, and that you can't lay the hammer down when it's necessary. So how I make sense of it is be kind and don't tolerate bullshit, in that order and on repeat, because it's not a one-shot
Yeah.
deal. We will need to do this again and again and again. And it's exhausting, this whole human relationship shit, but it never ends. Yeah. And if you do that at least right 30% of the time, you don't have to be magic at this. The bar's low. You will have kids who remember you like you just did today with your hockey coach 20 years later. And it will come to their mind like this. And I will tell you, 0.09% of kids will make the bigs. We're not in this business to make the NHL or even the dub or any sort of middle. We're there to teach kids that they matter, that they should stay alive. These are our sons and our daughters. And if I see your kid, you see mine. That's how we build communities that are going to make kids healthier than they've ever been.
So Jody, the highlight of my, I don't care what happens from here now. The highlight of my day is when you said 20 years ago when I was like 14. That was awesome. Made my day. I'll take it. I'm going to run with it. So the new book, Feeling Seen, Reconnecting in a Disconnected World, it's available for pre-sale on September 15th. So I think that, at some time in the spring of 2020, the pandemic hits us and we all kind of go scurrying over here to deal with that. And then at some point, I don't know exactly when, it's like, oh my God, there's like a whole nother thing we got to deal with here. Like with our kids in particular, like they're being educated at home via Zoom, they don't have access to sports. At what point was the seed planted with you that, hey, like I got to use my years of experience here and provide some guidance here and how we, get back to being connected?
I love that question. And I built this platform really because I needed it. And it started during the pandemic. I would do live on Sunday nights, sort of like this, where
Yeah.
we just jump on and I would have a conversation with, whoever would pop on. And so that's turned out to be, 1,000 people at, various times. And then, so during the pandemic, I was like, let's do that every morning. Is anybody up for having coffee for 30 minutes and we'll just jump on live and really remind each other that we got it. Like, it's going to be okay. Right. Like, and so then there were people all over the world, and these would get, 20,000 views. We would really engage and have some hard conversations. Sometimes it would be like, stupid shit. And other times it would be like,
Yeah.
okay, here's what we're going to do. And so that really became the impetus for how this platform was built, and how, why Kids These Days was sort of easy to get out into the world, because it was like, here's this message in, about reconnection that really started to matter. And when we started to do that with kids and teachers, it became really clear to me that that also applies to police officers and funeral directors
Interesting.
and bus drivers and hockey coaches and farmers. And I've been asked to speak in big corporate venues with 10,000 people in the room. And I can go to the Legion Hall in Balf, Alberta, where there's like powdered cream, and it's 30 people. And the slide deck doesn't change, because the message is always the same. When you are acknowledged, you rise. And we've never been so unable to acknowledge each other in this season than we have before. So the answer to it all for me is very easy. How we got there, though, is important to understand. What we do about it is really clear to me, but how we stay in the game is the critical piece, because you will never arrive. So I put that all in a little book, and HarperCollins said, "Do you think the world needs this book right now?" And I said, yes, I do. I believe that to the core of me. And so they said, "Okay, we'd love to take it." So there was some crying, and then they were like, "Let's put this in every airport and Target and Walmart and all the things." And I mean, I'm this like little kid from Viking Alberta, Canada. And to think that this book might do, big things in the world is just, I mean, every day I can't believe this. And so it's been such a journey, and heartbreaking, and, I've learned big lessons along the way, but I think that, it just never ceases to amaze me how much people just need to know they matter.
So we're going to close here. Full transparency. When I went out to the Hockey Alberta Development Summit in Red Deer, and I'm looking at the agenda, and we have our booths, and I see the keynote speaker, this Dr. Jody Carrington. I'm like, oh man, Jays are playing right now. There's a bar down the hallway. That could be kind of fun. I don't know if this is going to be important, but you started talking. You had me in about 2 minutes. And
no, I did not. You said to me in the first 2 minutes, this was either going to be a train
yeah,
wreck.
I hung up for 2 minutes.
It was going to be really good. So you grabbed a beer and wanted to watch what happened. That's what you said to me.
Well, yeah, but you okay. So you drew me in. Fair enough. You drew me in. I gave it a shot. But I think the reason you drew me in is because you made it human. You were able to share personal stories, and you were funny. And listen, like I think there's the two most intimidating things in life are either going into an arena and trying to either fight another human or ride a bull, or to get up on a stage and try and make people laugh. Like those two things right there. But, I was amazed. I'm like, you had a room full of people, albeit from just a total cross section of life. And you had everybody rolling, and you kind of broke it down. And then once you had them broken down, then you kind of hit on the tough subjects. And I just look at I bring this up because I look at coaching, and I feel like so many coaches feel like they got to be Herb Brooks, or they got to be Scott, or they got to be Daryl Sutter, and it's like Daryl Sutter is Daryl Sutter. Like,
he's an amazing human.
Yeah.
He really
but I
is.
think everybody can be an amazing human and be an amazing if they can just be themselves. And so, and I sense that's why you've done all these things, is because you've been able to go out and just, be unbashful and just being you. And just how important is that, I guess, as we close here, in leadership, is just keeping it real.
I think so too. Like authenticity, vulnerability, all of those kind of things. You can't tell people how to be kind or anti-racist, or that you're doing your work in this place of trying to be a better human. You got to show them. So we can say this all the time, be kind. No, I really want to, attend to my biases that I have about, women in this sport, or, why there's no people of color, generally speaking, in this sport. No, you can't tell them, you have to show them. And I think it is the constant work of wanting to know that we were better, than we were yesterday, which means, we need to do that work together. And I think, I've never been prouder to be a part of a hockey community, because I think it is one of the sports that are now really willing to dive in and talk about a culture that's no longer serving its people. And I just so hope that, I get to be a small part of that, Aaron. Your work is just phenomenal. So I'm, so grateful that I got to be a part of this today.
Well, listen, we appreciate you. And it's just been such a great experience getting to know you, learn more about your work. And it's, we're here to talk about sports, man. For anybody listening, like it is vibrated through my relationships at home, at the office, everywhere. And it's great. So if people want to connect with you, if people want to find you, particularly if there's any grassroots organizations or professional organizations that want to reach out to you, where do they go?
Yeah, drjodycarrington.com. Everything you need is there. Yeah.
Brilliant. Jody, thanks so much. This was awesome.
Thanks for having me.
The Glass and Out podcast is a The Coaches Site production.